An eerie, shrill whistle pierced the humid night air above Gilliard's Island in the Santee River swamp. A second call followed, then another. Like the cry of the whippoorwill, the sound penetrated through the pines, the moss-draped cypress trees, and the tall canebrakes surrounding the patriot militia camp. There, among their palmetto-thatched huts, the men sat and talked around small campfires they had lit to ward off the mosquitoes and deer flies that swarmed the surrounding marshes and creeks. These oozing, misty morasses were made all the more impenetrable by the alligators and water moccasins that inhabited them. The bird calls on this night were not, however, those of the whippoorwill, but a series of signals by sentries concealed in the nearby treetops. At times a guide to friends searching for the secret lair, at other times a warning of the approach of foes. The whistles on this August evening were a summons for men to gather for an expedition south to reinforce a fellow patriot force being harassed by Tories. A nearly 100-mile march, commencing at night over unfrequented roads, lay ahead of the men encamped at Pear's plantation. It was time again for the swamp fox to move out. Prologue. The Darkest Hour. July 25, 1780, General Gates's camp at Hollingsworth Farm on Deep River near Buffalo Ford, North Carolina. They were a motley-looking bunch, the 20 or so militia volunteers who rode on horseback that day into the camp of General Horatio Gates, the newly appointed commander of the American Continental Army in the South. Some were white, some were black, and among them was a Catawba Indian or two, enemies of the British and Cherokees. A few of the soldiers were barely in their teens. One of Gates's officers, noting the wretchedness of their attire, described the newcomers' appearance as so burlesque that the Continentals had to restrain themselves from laughing at them. At their head rode a diminutive 48-year-old man who, at around 5'2" and 110 pounds, possessed the physique of a 13-year-old boy. His knock knees, deformed since birth, nearly touched one another. His hook nose and narrow face gave him a homely appearance, and he walked with a pronounced limp. Yet his flashing black eyes and steely demeanor, along with his blue Continental uniform, rumpled though it was, cautioned the mocking soldiers not to laugh at the ragged group in his presence. It was a precarious moment for the patriot cause. 2 months earlier, in May 1780, the port of Charleston had fallen to the British after a 6-week siege, the greatest disaster the Americans would suffer during the entire war. The British quickly established a chain of forts and outposts from the Atlantic coast to the western mountains to control South Carolina's interior. They planned to roll up through the Carolinas and Virginia one by one and eventually trap George Washington between New York and the Redcoat advance from the south, finally ending the rebellion.